911, what's your emergency? The voice on the line trembled with fear, yet something in its cadence felt rehearsed. It's Evelyn Crane, 64 Ashton Lane. There's a black woman tampering with my home network. She's dangerous. She's trying to hack into my personal devices. I don't know what she's capable of. The dispatcher paused, uncertain. On the other end, Evelyn's panicked breathing filled the silence. Please, send someone now. I'm scared for my life. 2 doors down, behind the sleek glass of a modern home office, Daniella Brooks sat calmly in front of her dual-monitor setup. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, methodically updating her home Wi-Fi credentials. A steaming mug of mint tea sat untouched beside her, its warmth forgotten as her mind clicked into analytical overdrive. Just minutes earlier, she'd noticed an unusual spike in bandwidth usage. At first, she assumed it was a glitch, but Daniella was no ordinary user. She was the chief technology officer at Brightscale Systems, a leading cybersecurity firm. And anomalies were her specialty. She'd logged into her router, pulled the connection logs, and froze. There it was, a device with no familiar MAC address siphoning data through her network. Location tag? The house next door. Evelyn Crane. Daniella raised an eyebrow. Evelyn, white, 62, with silver hair that never strayed from its weekly curl, was the self-proclaimed matriarch of Ashton Ridge. She hosted community fundraisers, organized Christmas light competitions, and handed out cookies every Halloween with a smile so polished it squeaked. And yet, here was her digital fingerprint. Daniella didn't panic. She didn't confront. She simply changed the password. That's all. But somehow, that action, changing a password to protect her own property, had just been reported to 911 as a criminal offense. Cut to black. Then a single question fades in, white against the void. What would you do if your neighbor called the police because you changed your Wi-Fi password? Outside, the golden haze of a spring morning blanketed Ashton Ridge. The neighborhood was picture perfect, hedges trimmed, mailboxes gleaming, American flags flapping lightly in the breeze. But something colder than air drifted between those picket fences. Evelyn Crane stood in her pristine garden, clutching her iPhone with one hand, dialing with the other. Her eyes locked on Daniella's house like a hawk spotting a threat. Her voice carried, sharp, urgent, trembling, just enough to be believable. Yes, she's standing near my property line. No, I don't feel safe. Yes, she's black. 3 blocks away, a squad car changed course. There was a certain charm to Ashton Ridge, the kind that whispered perfection rather than shouted it. Nestled in the northern suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, it was the kind of neighborhood where mailboxes matched the trim of the houses and sidewalks bore no cracks. Every lawn looked like it had been trimmed by hand. Every window gleamed like a magazine ad. It was a place where nothing unusual ever seemed to happen, and that was the point. To Daniella Brooks, 35, this was a milestone, her reward. She'd spent the better part of a decade building Brightscale Systems from a garage startup into a nationally recognized name in enterprise software security. Long nights, failed prototypes, meetings where she was the only black woman in the room, none of it had stopped her. And now, here she was, a newly minted homeowner in a gated community where the entry signs were carved in stone and the HOA newsletters came with scented inserts. It was her first real pause. Her house, a sleek modern colonial with high ceilings and glass-paneled doors, sat on the eastern curve of Ashton Ridge. It faced the small neighborhood park, where golden retrievers chased frisbees and yoga moms sipped matcha under elm trees. To Daniella, it felt like she'd bought into a still life painting. Except one thing didn't fit the frame: her. From day one, she noticed it. The brief flicker in someone's eyes at the grocery store. The neighbor who waved just a second too late. The way the mailman always asked her to show ID, even after 3 weeks of deliveries. She wasn't angry. She was used to it. Tired of it, but used to it. And then there was Evelyn Crane. At 62, Evelyn had the gait of someone who had never rushed a day in her life. Her silver hair, always tied in a tidy bun, bounced lightly when she walked. She smelled like lavender and old money. Evelyn was the one who left mason jars of homemade peach preserves on porches in the spring and led candlelight vigils in December. People called her the heartbeat of Ashton Ridge. The first time Daniella met her, it was pleasant enough. Evelyn knocked on her door with a bouquet of pale yellow tulips and a copy of the community newsletter folded precisely in thirds. "Welcome, dear. We've all been just so curious. It's nice to finally meet you." There was a pause. "You're renting, yes?" Daniella smiled politely. "Actually, I bought it." Evelyn blinked once, the kind of blink that says more than words. "Of course you did. Well, congratulations." From that day on, Evelyn always smiled when they crossed paths, but her eyes never did. Her compliments were warm, but hollow. She never lingered. Daniella chalked it up to generational awkwardness, or maybe garden-variety suburban chill. Ashton Ridge wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. At least for now, because sometimes the most manicured lawns conceal the darkest roots. It started with a lag. Not the kind you notice on Netflix or in a quick scroll through Instagram. This was deeper, systemic. Daniella Brooks was used to smooth, unbroken digital flow. As Chief Technology Officer of Brightscale Systems, she didn't just use technology, she built it. So when her video conference froze mid-pitch to a Silicon Valley client, she didn't panic. She narrowed her eyes. She closed the app, reset her settings, and ran diagnostics. Bandwidth drop, 62%. Packets lost, several hundred. Router access log, unfamiliar device connected. She leaned forward, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The MAC address didn't match any of her devices. Not the laptop. Not the iPad. Not even the guest TV. And the name associated with the IP was even more telling. Crane Rocku Living Room. Daniella froze for just a second, then let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Evelyn Crane. The neighbor. Miss Lavender and Peach Preserves. The self-appointed neighborhood greeter. The woman who still typed with one finger and once asked Daniella if streaming meant mailing movies. It didn't make sense, and yet the logs didn't lie. The volume of data transferred, the timestamps, the consistent access pattern. This wasn't some accidental link-up. It was intentional. Daniella didn't confront. She didn't knock. She didn't make a scene. She simply did what any normal homeowner would do. She changed her Wi-Fi password. It took 15 seconds. Then she went to bed. The knock came at 8:07 a.m. Sharp, measured, almost surgical. Daniella was still in her robe, sipping her coffee on the porch when she heard it. She set the mug down and opened the door. There stood Evelyn Crane, tulip queen of Ashton Ridge, hair in its usual flawless bun, pearl earrings in place. But today, her smile was gone. In its place was a thin, pressed line and a look in her eyes that Daniella had never seen before. Not cold. Not annoyed, contemptuous. "Did you change the password?" Evelyn asked, skipping any pleasantries. Daniella raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "Your internet," Evelyn said, voice sharpening. It stopped working on our side last night." "You had no right." The words hit like ice water. "Mrs. Crane," Daniella said evenly, "you were connected to my private network without permission." "That's not legal, and certainly not neighborly." Evelyn's nostrils flared. Her composure cracked just enough to reveal something bitter behind it. "You people," she said, voice laced with venom, "should be grateful when folks like us are willing to share anything at all. After all, it wasn't that long ago that someone like you couldn't even live here." Daniella didn't move, didn't flinch. She just blinked once. That was when Evelyn pulled out her phone. 911, yes. "I'm at 64 Ashton Lane. There's a woman here. I don't feel safe. She's hacked into my personal electronics. I think she's trying to access private data. She's aggressive, threatening. I'm shaking. I don't know what she's capable of." Theatrics. Daniella could hear it in the woman's voice, the sudden pitch change, the trembling breath that hadn't been there a second ago. Her hand gripped the railing beside her, but she said nothing. She didn't have to. She'd seen it before, the performance of victimhood, the weaponization of fragility. The coded panic hidden in, "I don't feel safe." She stood there in silence, barefoot in her robe, on the porch of a house she owned, in a neighborhood she helped pay taxes for, listening to her neighbor paint her as a threat for protecting what was hers. Down the block, a curtain twitched. A neighbor peeked through. Daniella glanced up at the bright Carolina sky. The morning was still. The sun is warm. But something in the air had shifted. Evelyn ended the call with a dramatic exhale and clutched her phone like a lifeline. Then she looked at Daniella one last time, eyes narrowing. "They'll be here soon. Let's see how your fancy job title helps you then." Daniella didn't answer. She didn't need to. She had already started documenting everything. Outside, Evelyn Crane was putting on a masterclass in suburban performance. From the edge of her neatly manicured lawn, she paced like a woman cornered, her voice cracking at all the right moments. She clutched her phone like a holy relic, breath hitching dramatically with every manufactured sob. Occasionally, she'd cast a glance toward Daniella Brooks' house and flinch, just enough, as if expecting a physical threat at any moment. Her cries carried across Ashton Ridge. "She's dangerous. She's invading my privacy. I don't feel safe." To the uninformed, it might have looked like fear, but Daniella knew better. Inside her home, the air was cool and still. No hysteria. No panic. Just the quiet hum of a high-speed server and the rhythmic tapping of a keyboard. She sat at her glass-top desk, posture steady, face unreadable. The only sign of tension was in her hands, moving fast, methodical. Her eyes darted across screens as lines of code, logs, and network data streamed before her. She had 15 minutes, maybe less. Police in Ashton Ridge didn't take long to respond to calls like Evelyn's. But Daniella wasn't wasting a second. She logged into her advanced router interface and pulled the last 48 hours of network activity. The connection from Evelyn's device, Crane Rockview living room, was just the tip of the iceberg. There were 6 other unknown devices, all mapped back to a singular external IP address next door. She ran the first trace. Result: multiple visits to online forums flagged by cybersecurity watch lists, hate speech, white nationalist threads, conspiracy groups. Second trace: dozens of logins to websites known for scamming the elderly, phishing portals, tech support spoof pages, fake charity sites. Third trace: encrypted traffic routed through suspicious offshore accounts with browser fingerprints that matched ransomware campaigns. Daniella's stomach turned, not from surprise, but from confirmation. This wasn't some petty bandwidth theft. This was something darker, something systemic. And her sweet neighbor Evelyn Crane wasn't a helpless old woman who'd accidentally clicked the wrong link. She was orchestrating something. Without wasting time, Daniella pulled all the logs, full metadata included, and saved them onto a 256 GB encrypted flash drive. Then she uploaded a copy to a secure cloud folder with two-factor authentication. Next step, the authorities. She composed a calm, clear email addressed to the Charlotte Cybercrime Division, attaching a report that would have made any digital forensics unit proud. Subject line, urgent, evidence of digital fraud, hate activity, and suspicious transactions linked to neighbor. She included timestamps, MAC address tables, IP logs, and screenshots. She didn't speculate. She simply presented the truth. As the cursor hovered over the send button, Daniella looked toward the window. Evelyn was still outside, raising her voice and gesturing toward Daniella's front door like a woman under siege. "You have no idea what's coming," Daniella thought. She clicked, send. 5 minutes later, she heard it, the distant wail of sirens, steadily growing louder. The sound that was supposed to scare her. The sound that, for people like Evelyn, came with authority, protection, and validation. But Daniella didn't flinch. She stood from her desk, took the USB drive, and slipped it into her blazer pocket. Her face remained composed, her steps steady. She had done what needed to be done. She had turned the system on itself, using facts, not fear, evidence, not outrage, precision, not panic. She reached her front door just as the squad car turned the corner, lights flashing in the morning sunlight. 2 officers stepped out, one Latina, one white, both in full uniform. Across the street, Evelyn waved them down like a starlet catching a cab. "Thank God you're here," she cried, already rehearsed. "She's stolen data. She's trying to access everyone's information." "I told you she didn't belong here." From the porch, Daniella met the officer's gaze directly. "Good morning, officers," she said calmly. "I have something important to show you." And just like that, the script began to change. The squad car slowed in front of 66 Ashton Lane, its lights casting urgent red pulses across the quiet rows of manicured hedges and tulip-lined sidewalks. The moment the wheels stopped, Evelyn Crane launched into motion like a seasoned stage actress hitting her cue. She rushed down her porch with a forced limp and crocodile tears already glistening in her eyes. "Thank God you're here," she wailed, hands clasped together dramatically. "She's a hacker. She's been breaking into my devices. She threatened me. I feared for my life." Lieutenant Alejandra Reyes, a composed Latina in her mid-40s, stepped out of the driver's seat and surveyed the scene with calm precision. Her partner, Officer Tom Delaney, tall and stone-faced, moved behind her, one hand resting near his belt. Evelyn pointed toward Daniella's front door like she was pointing out an intruder. "That woman, right there, she doesn't belong here. I've always known something wasn't right with her." At the top of the steps stood Daniella Brooks, her expression unreadable, her spine straight as steel. She opened the door fully and raised her hand in a silent greeting. "Officers," she said with quiet authority, "I think you'll want to see what I've uncovered. Please, come inside." Reyes tilted her head, curious. Delaney gave a nod. The officers exchanged a glance and followed Daniella in. The atmosphere inside the house was the exact opposite of the chaos outside. It was still, efficient, and deliberate, much like Daniella herself. On the desk sat her laptop, reopened and logged in. Multiple windows displayed clear, damning data: IP traces, access logs, screenshots, and financial anomalies. A digital map connected activity from Evelyn's address to a host of extremist websites and fraudulent schemes targeting the elderly. "I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Brightscale Systems," Daniella began, her voice cool but steady. "I noticed unusual activity on my network and investigated. What I found," she motioned toward the screen, "is deeply disturbing, and it all leads back to my neighbor." Reyes stepped forward, brows knitting as she scanned the screen. Delaney leaned in closer, eyes narrowing. "These are forum visits tied to hate groups," Daniella continued, clicking open a file. "And here," she pulled up a spreadsheet, "are repeated logins to sites known for defrauding seniors. The IP address belongs to Evelyn Crane's residence." There was a sharp intake of breath behind them. Evelyn, who had followed the officers in, suddenly lunged forward. Her mask cracked. The tremble in her voice disappeared, replaced by raw desperation. "No one can see that!" she shrieked. In one violent motion, she grabbed the laptop and slammed it to the floor, the screen shattering into a spiderweb of black glass. Gasps filled the room. "You can't prove anything," she spat, eyes wild. "She's manipulating everything. She's making it up." But it was too late. Calmly, without breaking eye contact, Daniella reached into her blazer and pulled out a small black USB drive, placing it gently on the table. "Everything is backed up," she said, and already emailed the Charlotte Cybercrime Division, time-stamped, encrypted, traceable. Reyes exhaled, visibly impressed. Delaney muttered a quiet, "Jesus." Evelyn, now pale and shaking for real, stumbled back a step, as if realizing the performance was over and the truth had been center stage the whole time. You can't," she stammered. "I already did," Daniella replied. Reyes stepped forward and retrieved the USB, tucking it into an evidence bag. Her tone shifted, firmer now. "Ms. Crane, I need you to stay exactly where you are." "No," Evelyn hissed. "You don't understand. I was protecting this neighborhood. I was keeping it pure, safe from people like her." Delaney stiffened. "That's enough." But Evelyn didn't stop. Her voice rose, shrill and cracked with fury. "They don't belong here, not her kind." The words hung in the air like poison. Daniella said nothing. She didn't have to. The data spoke louder than any voice ever could. Silence blanketed the room, thick and suffocating. Officer Tom Delaney knelt beside Daniella's shattered laptop, now nothing more than twisted glass and exposed wiring. But the real focus of the room was on the small black USB lying in Lieutenant Alejandra Reyes's gloved hand. She inserted it into her department-issued tablet and began navigating the folders, her eyes narrowing with each click. Data streamed across the screen. Transaction logs, bank records, forum screenshots, names, emails, millions of dollars in movement traced to anonymized wallets. But there was no anonymity here, not anymore. "This," Reyes muttered under her breath, "this isn't just stolen Wi-Fi. This is coordinated fraud. And this," she tapped on one file marked personas.csv. "This is a list." Daniella stood a few feet away, arms crossed, face still unreadable. But her voice, when it came, was steady as stone. "Evelyn didn't do this alone," she said quietly. "This is part of a network. A system. A scheme that goes beyond neighborhood gossip and free internet." Officer Delaney turned from the screen, his expression tightening. "You're saying this is organized?" Daniella nodded. "Organized and targeted. These weren't random victims. They went after vulnerable retirees, specifically those who donated to progressive causes. There's a pattern in the victims." That's when it happened. Evelyn's cell phone, which had been lying dormant in her purse near the fireplace, began to ring. She lunged for it with the reflexes of a woman half her age, but Delaney was faster. He picked it up and looked at the screen. His brow arched. "Mayor Neil Archer," he read aloud. The room shifted. You could feel it. The officers tensed. Daniella didn't blink. Evelyn's voice broke like glass. "Don't answer that!" she screamed. "Give it to me! You don't know what you're doing!" She lunged again, but Rhea stepped between them. "Enough!" But Evelyn was unraveling now. The fragile mask of the perfect neighbor, the lavender-scented illusion, was gone. "You don't get it!" she shrieked. "I protect this neighborhood." "You think it was always like this? You think people like her belonged here 5 years ago? I kept this place safe, clean, ours." Delaney stood stone-faced. Rhea stared with the disgust of someone watching rot bubble up from beneath polished floors. But Evelyn wasn't done. "Those old fools deserve it," she hissed, voice venomous. "They gave their money to the wrong causes. They didn't think someone like me was watching. They deserve to lose everything if they're that stupid." Daniella didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence echoed louder than any outrage could. Outside the bay window, curious neighbors had begun to gather. Someone raised a phone. Another whispered to their spouse. The ripple had started. Then the second squad car arrived. Out stepped 2 detectives from Charlotte's cybercrime division, including Detective Grace Chen, short, sharp-eyed, and already holding a printed copy of the email Daniella had sent just an hour earlier. "Miss Brooks?" she asked, stepping inside. "We received your report. We've reviewed the evidence. Impressive work." Evelyn flinched. What report?" Chen held up a folder thick with documentation. Every fraudulent transaction, every access point, every racist post. It's all here, and connected to your household. The words "connected to" stung more than "accused of." Evelyn's face crumpled. "You can't do this." "I'm a respected citizen. I host charity drives. I know everyone." "Yes," Chen cut in. "And during those drives, you collected personal data from vulnerable seniors. You used that information to empty their retirement accounts. You masked the theft through shell charities tied to city officials. You're not a neighbor, you're a predator." That's when the doorbell rang again. Another neighbor. Then another, and another. Phones were out. Cameras recording. The woman they all thought they knew, the heart of Ashton Ridge, was now center stage in a scandal unraveling in real time. And then Daniella, still calm, looked Evelyn in the eye. "I changed my Wi-Fi password," she said quietly, "and you tried to destroy me for it. But in the end, your entire world collapsed because I refused to look away." Outside, someone shouted, "That's her! That's the one from the video!" The wall Evelyn had built with politeness, pie contests, and faux generosity finally fell. The sound of metal handcuffs clicking shut echoed across Ashton Ridge, louder than any siren. Evelyn Crane, once the darling of the neighborhood, the smiling face behind every bake sale and charity dinner, now stood hunched and handcuffed on her own lawn, her pressed linen blouse stained with sweat, her voice barely a whisper as she begged the officers to listen. But no one was listening. Not anymore. The 2 arresting officers flanked her as she stumbled toward the patrol car, her heels scraping across the driveway where she used to wave to neighbors every morning. Behind her, phones were out. Neighbors filmed in stunned silence. Some whispered, others gasped. A few, those who had always suspected something was off, simply shook their heads. "They got it all on video," one man murmured. The way she screamed, the hate in her voice. Within hours, the footage had made its way to social media. And within one day, it went viral. Neighborhood grandma caught in $15 million fraud scandal. Caught on camera. Woman yells racist rant before cybercrime arrest. White collar, white lies. Ashton Ridge crumbles. It wasn't just the video, it was everything behind it. The perfect image shattered. The old woman who made casseroles for the HOA picnic was also behind a multi-state cybercrime ring built on deception, theft, and white supremacy. The investigation exploded outward like a detonation in slow motion. Detective Grace Chen, leading the cybercrime task force, held a press conference 2 days later. She stood in front of a podium, stone-faced, surrounded by boxes of confiscated files and hard drives. What began as a simple home network intrusion complaint has exposed a criminal enterprise spanning 5 states, involving millions in financial fraud, and linked to a disturbing pattern of racially motivated targeting. The room went silent. We have confirmed that the suspect, Evelyn Crane, was not acting alone. Our evidence has uncovered a sophisticated web of shell charities and community events that were used as covers to harvest personal data from elderly donors, most of whom were progressive-leaning, affluent retirees. These events were coordinated with the knowledge and assistance of several local officials. The words hit like bricks. By the end of the day, Mayor Neil Archer submitted a terse, one-sentence letter of resignation. 3 members of the Charlotte City Council were arrested and charged with wire fraud, conspiracy, and aiding and abetting cybercrime. Investigators traced over $15 million routed through fake nonprofits, flowing through offshore accounts and laundering schemes that had gone undetected for years. And the face at the center of it all, Evelyn Crane, became the symbol of a different kind of monster. Not the kind that hides in alleyways or behind ski masks, the kind that wears pearls, bakes cookies, and smiles while stealing everything from the people who trusted her most. Daniella watched it all unfold from the quiet of her home office. The very same room where she had uncovered the first clue, a sluggish Wi-Fi speed. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt something deeper. More sobering, confirmation that sometimes the worst harm doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the person who offers you pie on Sunday, then steals your future on Monday. She watched as pundits argued on cable news, as reporters camped outside City Hall, as national outlets dissected the Ashton Ridge affair like it was a Netflix crime docu-series. But she never gave an interview. Not yet. Because this wasn't over. She knew the system Evelyn had built, under smiles and doilies, had roots deeper than anyone wanted to admit. It wasn't just one woman. It was everyone who looked the other way, everyone who laughed at the jokes. Everyone saw Daniella as an outsider the moment she moved in. The web had been exposed. But the cleanup had only just begun, and Daniella Brooks wasn't going anywhere. Not until every string of the spider's web was cut. The gavel dropped with finality. Evelyn Marie Crane, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and hate crimes. For a moment, there was silence in the courtroom, a deep, pregnant silence, the kind that settles when a lie collapses under the weight of its own arrogance. Then Evelyn exploded. "This is a joke," she screamed, rising from her seat with the dignity of a burning flag. "You people are destroying this country. You're the criminals. You're the thieves." The bailiff stepped forward, but Evelyn's fury only grew louder. "This judge is biased," she pointed, spit flying from her lips. "She's a disgrace, and that lawyer, that traitor, sold me out. You'll all pay for this." Her voice cracked, but not with sorrow, with hatred. Gone were the pearls and lavender. Gone was the cooing voice that once charmed neighbors over lemonade and hymns. What stood now was the real Evelyn Crane, a woman who had built her power on deception and saw accountability as betrayal. The judge didn't flinch. Neither did the jury. And when the guards escorted Evelyn out, kicking and cursing, not a single soul stood to defend her. The video of her meltdown in court went viral within hours. But by then, the nation had already moved on to what mattered more, the change that followed. A month later, the white picket fence at 64 Ashton Lane was replaced with a modern black iron one. The shutters were repainted. The geraniums were gone. The house Evelyn once ruled like a queen had been auctioned off. The buyers, the Nguyen Robinson family, a multiracial couple with 2 young kids, both professionals who'd long dreamed of finding a home in a place like Ashton Ridge. For years, they'd been outbid, overlooked, politely rejected. But now the community was watching itself more carefully, and they had Daniella Brooks to thank for that. On a crisp Saturday morning in early spring, the aroma of jerk chicken, banh mi, and peach cobbler mingled in the air as neighbors gathered for a block-wide welcome party. Children played under string lights. A local musician strummed soft guitar chords on the front lawn. Laughter echoed. At the center of it all stood Daniella, wearing a simple navy sundress and a quiet smile. She greeted each guest like an old friend, even the ones who had once looked through her. "This is what the neighborhood should have been all along," someone whispered behind her. It took her, standing alone, to make the rest of us see it. The new homeowners, the Nguyen Robinsons, hugged Daniella warmly, tears in their eyes. "Thank you for making space," the wife said softly. "No," Daniella replied. "You were always meant to be here. Someone just had to pull the weeds." That night, after the lights were taken down and the laughter faded into twilight, Daniella sat alone on her porch, watching the neighborhood breathe a different rhythm. Ashton Ridge had changed, not because a racist was removed, but because the illusion of perfection was shattered, and in the cracks, something more honest began to grow. She didn't crave recognition. She didn't seek applause. But when a teenage girl from the next street over quietly placed a thank you note on her doorstep, she felt the gravity of what had been done. One woman, one password, one refusal to stay quiet. And now, an entire neighborhood was learning how to live without its mask. In her first public words since the trial, Daniella was asked by a journalist, "What do you say to those who still think racism is subtle or dying?" She paused before answering. "It wears many faces," she said. "Sometimes it bakes cookies. Sometimes it smiles while stealing your future. But silence is its greatest shield. And the moment we stop mistaking politeness for goodness, that's when things begin to change." And for Ashton Ridge, that change had finally begun. The auditorium at Harvard University was packed. Students from the law school filled every row, notebooks open, laptops aglow. Professors leaned forward in their seats, some holding annotated copies of court documents, others gripping copies of The Ethics of Technological Resistance. A few students in the back live-streamed the event, their captions simple but weighted. "She's here." And at the center of it all stood Daniella Brooks, no longer just the CTO of a cybersecurity firm. She was a symbol now. A voice, a case study, a turning point. She stepped up to the podium wearing a crisp navy blazer and a steady expression. No teleprompter, no notes. Just the truth. She looked out across the crowd, then leaned in. "Ironically," she began, "it all started because a white woman didn't want to pay for her own internet." There was a pause, a ripple of stunned laughter. But behind that laughter came something deeper: recognition, discomfort. "Reflection," Daniella continued, her voice calm but deliberate. "She saw my presence in that neighborhood as a threat even before I changed my Wi-Fi password. She tolerated me, but only until I dared to enforce boundaries. Then the mask slipped. And what came out wasn't just entitlement. It was hatred, dressed in the language of safety and suspicion. "We like to think racism wears boots and shouts slurs," she said. "But sometimes it wears a cardigan and hands out cookies at fundraisers. That doesn't make it less dangerous. It just makes it harder to spot, until it's too late." Her eyes scanned the room. Evelyn Crane didn't just steal the internet. She stole identities. She stole futures. She weaponized charm and used it to disarm the very people she was targeting, and the system let her, for years. Why? Because she looked like someone society still trusted, and I looked like what society still fears. The case of North Carolina versus Evelyn Crane had become more than a courtroom drama. It had become required reading. Law schools analyzed it for its implications on digital privacy, consent, and the boundaries of racial profiling in cybercrime investigations. Sociology departments unpacked the story as a modern parable of implicit bias, white fragility, and institutional complicity. The story had been cited in over 30 academic journals, translated into 7 languages, and taught in ethics seminars from Stanford to South Africa. But to Daniella, it was still personal. "I didn't fight Evelyn with anger. I fought her with logs, data packets, and encrypted backups," she said, pacing slightly. "I didn't match her screams. I built a wall of evidence so airtight it didn't matter how loud she got. That's the lesson here," she added. "You don't always have to roar to resist. You just have to refuse to be erased." The room was silent now, every pen frozen mid-air, every gaze fixed. She concluded with a line that would later be etched into the walls of future classrooms. "Monsters don't always growl. Sometimes they smile and invite you to tea." As the applause thundered through the hall, Daniella stepped down from the podium, not as a guest speaker, but as a revolutionary in heels. Outside, in the real world, the ripple effect continued. The Ashton Ridge HOA bylaws were rewritten to include anti-discrimination clauses. A national task force on cybercrime and racial targeting was launched, using the Crane case as precedent. Daniella herself was appointed to a federal advisory board on digital ethics and justice reform. But most importantly, neighborhoods changed. Conversations changed. The quiet became louder. The glances became questions. And the unspoken rules, those invisible walls of who belonged, began to crumble. Because one woman refused to stay quiet when her internet slowed down, and instead of resetting a password, she reset the system. If this story moved you, if it made you think, reflect, or even just see the world a little differently, don't let it end here. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful, true-to-life stories that challenge injustice and spotlight voices that refuse to be silenced. Like the video to show your support for stories that matter. And most importantly, share this story. Because awareness is the first step toward change, and someone in your circle needs to hear this today. Together, we turn whispers into action. Thank you for watching.